when you joined the response center at Microsoft, one of the things that we would tell people is they would come on to help them understand how important a job this was, is that back in those days, 90% of everything that plugged into the internet was Windows and made by Microsoft.
That's right.
So back in those days, we were carrying 90% of the safety of the internet on our shoulders.
Who says tech can't be human?
What's going on, Hacker Valley fam? Welcome back to the show. With me, I have a special guest who's been on the podcast before. It's been a little bit. It's been far too long. My special guest for this episode is Christopher Budd. Christopher is a cybersecurity veteran and someone that has spent 10 years working in the Microsoft Response Center. He actually helped build it from the ground up. Many have tried, many have fallen. Christopher, you're one of the, I would say, OGs in the game that has seen incident response transform in front of our eyes, because it's a lot different than it was, I'm sure, when you first got started and when I first got started. But we'll get into all that. Most importantly, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love being here. Really glad to be back. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I would be doing better if I was part of this recent news story that just came up about Wiz being acquired for $32 billion. That is so crazy.
I know. It's just nuts. I mean, Thoma Bravo bought Proofpoint like a year and a half ago for like $12 billion, and everyone was saying how big that was then. And so, this is like, almost 3 proof points. It's nuts. And the interesting thing is Google was trying to buy them over the fall, and I think the number I saw back then was around 24 billion. So
wow.
Clearly Google really wanted Wiz, and what's 12 billion between friends.
Right. And you know what? Like, Wiz is the darling right now in the cybersecurity space. At RSA and Black Hat, they really stole the show and honestly stole my heart with their suite display. They had like a little candy mart. It was amazing.
Oh, really? I didn't. I was at RSA last year, but I was stuck on the floor, so I didn't see. And what kind of candy did they have? They
had donuts. They had sodas. They had like sweet candies that give you cavities. But I went around and I asked them, I said, hey, why do you have a convenience store and a sweet store as a booth? And they said, because they want to delight their customers. I said, oh my goodness, like, you all get branding, customer service. It's all about the other user. And I think a lot of times in cyber, we forget that it's about the people. We try to focus on building like the next ironclad technology. But really what I would like is maybe a little bit more time back, a little less stress.
No, that's a really good point, and it's a really good perspective that they're showing, because I've been talking recently with some folks about how I think, and it's not just security, but how I think in tech the industry has gotten away from customer focus almost to a point of what I've called customer hostility at times.
Yeah.
Where companies aren't listening to what people want, but instead forcing things on people. Certain companies that are enabling AI assistants by default with no way to turn them off come to mind. Not that I'm going to name names.
I think I want to get into the AI. And I want to first start by getting into some of the epic work that you've worked on, because I think we'll be able to kind of compare and contrast where we're at today and where we started. One of the things that I know about you is that you worked on a very notable incident that was probably not looked at as such a historic event because it was around the time of the September 11th attack back in 2001. Yep. But let's start there. Kind of give us a lay of the land. What happened? Who was it?
Sure.
Where was it?
Sure. I mean, here's another thing, quite honestly. A lot of people don't think about it because a lot of people in the industry weren't in the industry when this happened.
Exactly.
This qualifies as ancient history. I've actually worked with people when I tell them about the Nimda attack, which is what we're talking about, which happened about a week after the September 11th attacks back in 2001. I talk with some people in the industry and they're like, oh, I wasn't even born yet.
That's true.
Which is really sobering. But no, NMDA happened, like you said, about a week after September 11th. It started on a Monday. I was in the Microsoft Security Response Center at the time. It was an attack against Microsoft products, against a vulnerability that we in the Response Center had patched. There was a patch available, but as is so often the case, people hadn't applied the patch. I'm in a training session on a Monday morning, and it's funny how memory is, because I almost remember it as a pager, but I know it wasn't a pager. I think it was a Motorola StarTAC phone. I'm getting messages from my colleagues saying, "Hey, something's going on," and I'm texting back, with the phone keypad saying what's going on, and and basically the world was blowing up in as this attack unfolded, and it was called NMDA because of a string that the attackers had put in the malicious code, and it caused huge network disruption. It was this was back in the days, long before ransomware, back in the days when big attacks meant network disruption, meant networks crashing, things going down, and this was happening a week, not even a week after the September 11th attacks.
Right.
And so in that, we talk in incident response, we talk about the fog of war, where you don't know what's happening. You're getting spotty information. You're getting information that's sometimes wrong. So in the early blushes of this, we didn't know if this was a cyber component to the September 11th attacks. It wasn't. And it took us days to get hold of it, to get our arms around it and get things controlled. I remember my grand boss, who ran the response center, that coming out of his office, we were in Building 5 at Microsoft. This was so long ago that Building 5 is now gone. Microsoft has knocked that down for a new building. Came out of his office and said, "I just got off the phone with the White House, and they're asking, what are we going to do when the internet crashes?"
Yikes.
You talked about a different world. Back in those days, one of the things that when you joined the response center at Microsoft, one of the things that we would tell people as they would come on to help them understand how important a job this was, is that back in those days, 90% of everything that plugged into the internet was Windows and made by Microsoft.
That's right.
So back in those days, we were carrying 90% of the safety of the internet on our shoulders.
So break down the attack. Like, did it target Microsoft, the corporation? Was it targeting companies?
It was an unchecked buffer in a networking component within Windows, and you could carry out a buffer overrun attack. It was a classic worm where an infected system would go out, levy an attack against another system. If that system was vulnerable, the code would run there and replicate. And networks were crashing because the network load from infected systems going out trying to find other infected systems was just overloading the networks. This was back in the era where the damage caused by attacks was almost accidental. If we had something like that today, just to mark how different things are, if we had something like that today, what we'd be looking at is ransomware at threat actors using it to completely shut down systems, lock up the data, steal the data, and say this, the city of Austin can have its emergency system back for, I don't know, let's say $32 billion.
$32 billion.
But it was a completely different era in terms of attacks. It was a completely different era in terms of the landscape, and it was a completely different era in terms of the threat actors. Threat actors at that point in time hadn't really gone into big business. When I talk with people about what the threat actors are like these days, it's like The Godfather in the movies. It's all business. They are very efficient and effective and unsentimental business people.
Gotta be. I mean, you're in an illegal trade, so I would imagine the rules aren't the same rules that we have in the corporate world or, the law abiding world.
The rules aren't, but when we look at threat actors today, threat actor groups and organizations, one thing that we see is a high degree of professionalization. We know from chat log leaks and from information we can get from the forums and from the inside, some of these are structured entities with communications departments, with HR departments. When I was at Sophos leading the XOps team there, we did some research into how the threat actors operate from a communications point of view, because we had done some research after the Las Vegas ransomware attacks about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And one thing that we saw there was we had one threat actor group saying, hey, we did this, another threat actor group saying, no, we did it. And we saw these groups kind of fighting in the public sphere, trying to get reporters behind them. And I looked at that and said, I recognize what they're doing because I have a technical and a comms background. I recognize what they're trying to do. They're trying to hack the press. And so we went and did digging and found that, yes, their playbook has evolved. They're borrowing tactics that corporations use in terms of building and controlling the narrative. We found that they do job advertisements for people who to be professional comms people, English speakers preferred, and people who have an ability to write good ransom notes, essentially.
It's so crazy to think where we were and where we're going now. When I was working at McAfee in 2013, and it was the first time I had ever heard or seen of ransomware, and I was like, why would someone try to do this? They're obviously going to get caught. But at that time, we were using Bitcoin, and we were starting to understand the layer of anonymity that's really available on the web.
I had a similar moment, kind of scratching the head when ransomware was coming up, because I don't know if you remember, ransomware was evolved out of fake AV and police. We call it police ransomware, where you got the scary message saying, oh, we're Interpol, we caught you surfing porn, pay us. When ransomware was emerging in 2013, I was looking, I'm like, okay, I see why some people think this is a big problem, but it's really, just patch everything, don't open stuff, run good security, and have good backups, and you're fine.
Yep.
And I'm looking at my clock. This is 2025, so that was 12 years ago, and it's still a huge problem.
We were so naive because a lot of our infrastructure was controlled on our premise. So like back in that time, especially for me and my group that I worked with, we had our own servers, we had our own server closet. So like we could literally harden a device and be pretty confident that we know what's going in and out, because we also have the networking attached to it. But I think that we were still naive, because if you have any open ports, or if you're even using the internet at all, it's just a risk. Like I used to think like, oh, if you didn't have any ports open, there's very little chance that you're actually going to get hacked. But I think at that time, we also weren't paying as close attention to the user element as we are now. Because I think at that time, the cyber adversary, they weren't going after the entire organization. They were going after a division or an individual person, because they knew they could get the ransom from them.
I'm sure some of this is because I've been around long enough. What we're doing, talking about how things were and how they've evolved, I think this is an incredibly important thing in our industry, because, expertise, we learn how to fight the bad people through, battle lessons and lessons learned. I was saying to someone else, when I watch Dateline a lot, when with Dateline, the really hard cases almost invariably end up being solved by the 20-year veteran detective. And they solve it because they've got the experience. And so what we're doing right now, I think, is incredibly important, and we should be doing more of it. But I think another thing, going back to 2013 that you're talking about, that's when people were getting on board the BYOD bandwagon.
Yep.
And one thing that's different today that I think is good, but is that back in those days, and I used to run networks, I think we all figured everything can be secure if I just have enough control. Exactly like you're saying. If I know the MAC address of everything that plugs into my network, and I can control it and patch it, then my network will be safe because I've got complete control. I've got a secure perimeter. And ransomware and BYOD taught us that basically that ain't ever going to happen. Welcome to the real world. And so, we've seen the rise of zero trust models, which I think is a good thing. When I first heard about zero trust, I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, we're security people. Of course, we don't trust anything.
Right.
But exactly to your point, things have just evolved in such a way that at this point, I think the idea of a secure, I actually can't. When's the last time you heard the phrase secure perimeter?
I hear talks about the perimeter, but not a secure perimeter, because now we talk about a borderless perimeter.
Right. Yeah. So that ideal has collapsed by the wayside.
It really has. One of the things that I like to do is try to also see into the future. I think with all of the amazing training and resources out there, I think veterans do have a leg up, because now there's just so much information. You could really pick and choose what you're going to be niche at, or some people still practice security from a general standpoint. Do you think that we're going to niche down, then ultimately go back to being generalist at some point? Or do you think we're going to further go down these niches like cloud security, container security, and all these other types of areas?
I shudder to use these words because they're so overused, but bringing in the AI piece. And here's why I think that's important, because and I'm a security person, I'm a privacy person, I'm a skeptic by nature. I'm skeptical of a lot of the claims around AI, but I am seeing places where it's useful. And where it's been useful is in automating repetitive work.
Yep.
When I talk about good AI, I talk about effective AI or practical AI. And I say, if you want an example of practical AI, use a visual metaphor. And the visual metaphor is, have you seen Aliens?
I have, yeah.
Okay. Those loaders that they use? The big things they strap into and let them lift, missiles and huge things.
Right.
If you think of AI as a loader, as something that doesn't replace people, but gives them greater strength, greater leverage, that is practical AI. And going to your point, I think that part of what the future for people working in this industry is AI automating the mindless, easy to automate stuff, but it's still going to need someone to conduct it, to direct it. It's going to need someone to run the loader.
Yep.
And what will make someone a good loader runner, if you will, is creativity, is an ability to see the big picture, the ability to understand what the various automated pieces are telling them, and to assemble it into a comprehensive picture.
I love that. I love it, because that's the future that I hope that we ultimately get to.
I see a lot of people saying, oh my God, jobs are going to be replaced by AI. Now, I will tell you, 20, 30 years ago, when we were starting to see some automation, like in the auto industry, one of the things that I said back then is, any job that can be completely automated by a robot was not a good job for a person, because the early replacement of people with robots on the assembly line for car factories was putting the bolts on the tires. Okay, spending 8 hours a day just that's not fulfilling for human beings on kind of an existential level. Why, yes, I did do my master's in philosophy. Why do you ask?
On the existential level.
If things can be automated, that enables that enables us to focus on the things that are more creative, that are truly more human. That's one of the reasons why I'm a skeptic, frankly, around AI because spell check still doesn't work really well. I'm still spending far more time fighting with formatting in Word than I would have expected. My first certification was in Word in 1995,
Yep.
and like 2 weeks ago, I was sitting there trying to figure out in Word, why is this one paragraph large and this other paragraph not? So, please, AI, figure that out.
I need to jump in for a second and share some details about a special group that we've created for you, our listeners. We understand the importance of creativity in cybersecurity, and Hacker Valley has created a special Cyber Creators Mastermind. Each month, we meet and discuss how to break down technical concepts through stories, the intricacies and opportunities of using audio and video to highlight what's important in cybersecurity, and we share how you can use content to highlight the hard work that you put into your craft. You can check out the mastermind by visiting hackervalley.com/mastermind. We'd love to help unlock your creative potential and would love to see you there. I think that AI will replace many jobs. Some people truly have a job where it's to monitor someone's email. A lot of the executive assistants that were available and around, especially when I was looking for one in 2019, they were people that would really help you check your email. They would check your email, they would mark things and label them. They did many other things depending on the executive assistant that you had. But we also have people that just sit at a front desk. And I think some organizations truly need that person because they have a high level of traffic. They might have tons of emails that come in and they're managing multiple $1 million deals. But for most people, we don't have that need to have someone truly sit down and watch a dial and react to it. It'd be great to have an AI do that on your behalf. And so you could get back to what you were doing. And like you were saying, it comes down to an existential level, because I think that it's great for AI to take jobs as long as jobs are opened up in other places. And I think that will be the case in cyber, because there's only one person that loves AI more than regular people. It's people that can get monetary gain. It's salespeople. The salespeople have been crushing it on LinkedIn. They've been giving me better messages. But the attacker as well. The attackers are getting more cunning, more sly. They're able to use more languages. So I think with that being said, the work is going to evolve, but the work will still be there for the foreseeable future.
And something that you said in there, I think, is critical for all of us to remember to stay oriented, and that is the attackers are human beings. For all the good that it can do, AI is inherently a closed system that is backward looking. It is only as smart as what it has learned from. What it has learned from is what is already out there.
Right.
And let's go back to what we were talking about earlier as far as ransomware. Ransomware has been successful in part because of the creativity and innovation of the attackers going into it.
Yep.
And if we were fighting ransomware only with AI, then as the saying goes, we would literally always be fighting the last war.
I think in ways we are, and that's the advantage that the attacker has, is they're able to bring creativity that doesn't apply to rules that we follow and launch it against us.
The essence of hacking, what makes people hackers, that essence is actually an essential element of being human. That human beings are clever mammals.
Yeah.
If you put a rock in front of us, we are going to start looking around it and figure out, how can I get around that rock? Hacking is ultimately, how can I get around that thing? How can I use this thing in a way no one thought of or anticipated?
Yep.
And that's where we do our best work as humans, and that's why, at most, I think AI is like that loader.
So I would love for us to imagine for a second that you are teleported to right now, but you're in the Microsoft Incident Response Center. You're trying to use AI to up your security program. How would you be using it if you were in that situation today from an incident responder?
Using it to filter out the noise to find the signal. So for instance, when I was in the MSRC, we would get vulnerability reports to secure@microsoft.com. What we always said is we would get 100,000 emails per year to that inbox.
Oof.
10% of those would be legitimate when you got rid of the spam, the pornography that the hackers would like to sign us up for. Yes, they really did do that. So 10% would be something that you would actually need to read, and 10% of that would be actual cases. So right out of the gate, being able to automate, getting rid of the 90% of spam, being able to analyze the 10% that needed actual looking at and extract out of that, here are the ones that are legitimate. That would be a huge help. Just across the board, we know from people who do managed detection and response work, for instance, people who are in the SOC, their biggest challenge these days is too much information.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything that we can do to, it's like in the jet fighters with the heads up display, everything that we can do to enable people to focus where they need to focus, when they need to focus, and ignore all the things they don't need to, that's important.
That is the thing that I think everyone's afraid of when it comes to AI, is providing it all that rich context, because when you're providing it the context, you're giving it, maybe sometimes sensitive information about you or your organization. But I think that's also what powers it, because the one thing that AI doesn't have is our experience. So like if you were to take the lessons learned from previous cases and apply it towards those new incidents or alerts that are coming in, I feel like the AI is going to really give you some insightful information about, hey, this is what happened recently. You just closed this out 3 different times in the past. Maybe it's this.
Right. And you've raised a really good point there, which is, now you're talking about, so in addition to a security background, I've got a privacy background. And, that hesitancy to share information, that takes us out of the security world into the privacy world. And the thing that is challenging is there's a degree to which we know what we need to do in the privacy world to make people be at ease about sharing that information. I've been at companies over the years that do that kind of data gathering for analysis. And you're absolutely right. We regularly would run into the problem where people would say, hell no, I'm not turning on data gathering because, they wouldn't have any more specific objection than, I don't want you to have my information. I don't know what you're going to do with it.
Right.
Well, in the privacy world, the 2 cardinal principles are notice and consent. Provide adequate notice about what you're collecting, what you're going to do with it, why you need it. I add my own thing to it, which is in the notice also explain what you're going to get in return for that. And then obtain proper consents, where the person says, well, yes, you can take my data. Getting people to be willing to share that information from a defender and a security point of view is a very good thing. But people have valid privacy concerns. One of the reasons I'm skeptical of the big generative AI models, for instance, is who knows where that data is going. We've seen instances where, there was a case where Toyota.
We know where it's going. It's going back into the training.
It is, and it's sometimes accessible. I want to say there was a case where some developers at Toyota were using, I think it was ChatGPT. This was about 2 years ago, 2 years ago, and they put in sensitive information in their development process, and someone was able to go in and fish it back out. Having good data controls, having good privacy controls around the information is absolutely critical. Actually, literally in the past week, I've been thinking that in the security space, we've been focused on attacks and everything. Data protection products have really fallen out of favor. When's the last time anyone talked about data protection products? But I think with generative AI coming up the way it is, for it to be in use, we're going to have to see a renaissance in data protection products that are going to ensure that people can use ChatGPT, but ensure that you're not shipping off your confidential quarterly numbers into the big data lake that everyone's going to use.
I wonder what's really going on behind the scenes. If I was at a big company right now, I would be using Microsoft Cloud or AWS because they have the models embedded within their infrastructure, and it's even HIPAA compliant. So if I were to do it, I would be doing it in that capacity where I know that Microsoft and Google are going to do their best of their ability to not be using that data. So I definitely think that's an avenue, and I'm really excited to see stuff like DeepSeek. I mean, it definitely hurt the U.S. stock market. NVIDIA shares were not looking good, and I have some NVIDIA shares. But I'm excited to see stuff like DeepSeek because it really opens up the future for doing things locally. Like at some point, this technology is going to have to run on our phone. It's kind of the Moore's law, and now these new AI laws defining how fast AI is going to be innovated. So I think that it's just a matter of time until we go back into this mode where we're doing more things on-prem. I think it's kind of like an ebb and flow, and technology is like, hey, let's use a mainframe. Nope, let's use our internal servers. Let's use the cloud. And now people are now worried, rightfully so, because their data is sprawled all over all these different service providers. And I'm a little worried about that too, but honestly, I need the productivity.
It's funny because when you look at the history of our industry, which, by the way, go into pop culture for a second. Have you seen *Halt and Catch Fire*, the TV show?
I haven't, no.
Oh my goodness, you need to see that. Please go watch it, and let's have another talk afterwards.
Okay.
Because that is like the best show that I've seen that captures the 80s and 90s, the PC era, the rise of the internet and everything that's going on. And one of the things that I remember from those days that you get a good sense of in that show is the rise of the PC and the Mac. The famous 1984 ad for Apple.
Yep, that's right.
And the whole theme of that was individuality over centralization. It was the Mac, the Mac standing up against the centralized big blue IBM power.
Yep.
And at the heart of that is local resources, local control, your personal computer. And I completely agree with you. I think we're, the industry goes back and forth, and I think we're due for a readjustment back to personal stuff. A couple of years ago, when people were talking about Twitter and moderation and things like that, one of the things that I was thinking to myself is it would be great if we could let the social media streams go, just unmoderated, uncensored, just let the streams go, and you have your personal agent that figures out what it is you're interested in and does it for you.
And that's where we are today with all of these algorithms.
Right.
So looking at, all the things that have gone on in your career, specifically from being in the incident response world, being such a prolific writer and publisher in the space, where do you see your skill set going next?
I've spent my career around protecting people and around building trust, defending people. And I think that's the next big frontier. I think that there is, AI, like all of this, is a tool. It has good and bad. And I think we want to maximize the good and minimize the bad. And I think that's the arena where there's the most opportunity. I will say, with kind of the long view, I think technology has become harder than it was when I first started. I think it's lost some of the excitement and optimism. I wrote an article like 5 years ago about how the last decade was a decade where perspectives turned pessimistic around technology. But at the end of the day, technology still enables us on its good days to do amazing things. I mean, I'm sitting here in Virginia, you're not in Virginia, we're talking like this. I'm sure there is someone that is watching this, as they're watching it somewhere in Europe, somewhere in Asia. We couldn't do anything like that 30 years ago.
Yeah, and it was hard enough until the pandemic. I think that's when you were actually on last. Like that really
Yes.
opened up this new playground that we're playing in.
It did. And, I'm a student of history. I was a history minor in college as well. You regularly see you have new developments and kind of revolutions, and then you have a counter revolution. Exactly to your point, we learned how much people can do remotely. We learned how productive people can be and all the good they can do from home, thanks to technology. For various reasons, people are trying to roll that back. I'll be upfront and say I fundamentally disagree with that. But exactly to your point, we advance. We can do things now that we could only dream of. In that vein, I'm going to hop in the Wayback Machine. Do you recall in the 90s, AT&T ran a series of ads that basically had a voiceover saying, "Have you ever checked your email from a beach? Have you ever done this?" And then the closing tagline was, "You will." Go find those. They're on YouTube, because it was the 90s, but the things that they talk about in this aspirational, here's what's going to come, we've come to realize.
I'm excited to see what the future holds for all of us, but especially for you. We definitely got to do this again. I feel like we might need to actually do just an episode on the history of cybersecurity, because I feel like we could go on for days about that.
Sign me up.
Done. Let's make it happen. Christopher, wanted to say thank you from the bottom of our heart for taking us out of your busy day to join us. For anyone that hasn't already connected with Christopher Budd, be sure to check out the show notes or description wherever you're listening or watching. And with that, we will see everyone again next time.